see you later. But thanks everybody for being on. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm Monica Weldon. I'm President CEO of Bridge the Gap, Syngap Education Research Foundation. And I really, really thank all of you for taking the time out to spend time with us today to understand this initiative that we have probably been working on the last 18 months with the FDA, and it's coming very close. And so we are super excited about the progress we've made it as a community, and really preparing for the future and what's coming. And so we are right along track with a lot of things that are going on parallel in the community within research. And so hopefully when this particular project comes to fruition, which will probably be completed in the next 10 months, 6 months after the meeting, but 10 months total, we will have an incredible product to get industry and get the FDA acquainted with our community. So with that, thank you. And I am going to hand over the presentation, which I'd like to introduce to you, James Valentine. He is and also Larry Bauer. They are with the Hyman group. They are our consultants with our organization that we have retained to help us to make sure that we are taking all the needed steps and we don't mess anything as we move forward. So James and Larry, I'm going to let you guys kind of introduce yourself and tell our community a little about what you do and why this meeting is so incredibly important for us.
Absolutely, Monica. So this is James Valentine here. You can see the face of my friend and colleague, Larry Bauer. As Monica said, we're with a group in Washington, D.C. that focuses on FDA regulatory issues and have specifically do a lot of work in patient-focused drug development. We both previously worked at FDA, Larry within the rare diseases program, working to help try to address the challenges that are unique to developing drugs for rare diseases from within the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. I was in a bit of a different role. I was a patient liaison, actually working within FDA to bring patients and patient advocates into FDA decision-making, both at the product level, but also helping stand up new programs to help facilitate that type of engagement. So I helped set up the patient-focused drug development initiative back when it was FDA-led. As you'll hear about today, we're in this new world of externally led patient-focused drug development. And Larry and I have worked with many different organizations, mostly in rare diseases, to put on these externally led PFDD meetings. So we look forward to sharing kind of our joint experiences and insights with all of you as we now plan this important meeting for to bring the voices of those living with SYNGAP1 to FDA. So we just want to acknowledge, of course, the sponsors for the meeting, for their support to help make this a reality. And I think Michelle or Monica had mentioned this, but we're going to be recording this at 1 hour webinar. That way you can actually go back and access this. And anyone that wasn't able to join us live today can view it on demand. We do just ask that you stay muted throughout the duration of this until we get to the question period, in which case you can enter questions and we will respond to those at the end of the webinar. And here we go. So to the core of our presentation for today. So what Larry and I want to do with you all is spend some time really setting the stage and giving you background that can be really helpful for you to understand and appreciate what this patient-focused drug development meeting is all about. Before I hand it off to Larry, who's going to start by sharing some background about drug development and the role that FDA plays, I just want to kind of set the stage kind of at a higher level, really about what this meeting's about. And so obviously the Food and Drug Administration is a key stakeholder that we're hoping to really educate about what it is to live with SYNGAP1. FDA really views you all as experts that can help teach them so much about this condition. And not only just the experiences day to day, but also the things that you view as the things that are most concerning, as well as to try to teach them about how it is that you try to manage with your condition and what meaningful treatments look like. And we're going to go into so much more about this, but really being able to paint this big picture for FDA that goes way beyond what they could learn just from reading the medical literature or from talking to a KOL, a key opinion leader, like a doctor. You know, they might, you know, see someone living with SYNGAP1 once a year, every 6 months. And that's not a lot of data points for those individuals to kind of speak to the disease. You all living with it as a patient or as a caregiver, you know, have 365 days a year worth of data, of information that you could share, so to speak. So why is it that you should participate if you're, you know, an individual who's caring for someone with SYNGAP1, and you know you're clearly here because you're interested in at least learning what this meeting is all about. But this is really, you know, a unique, almost, you know, kind of once in a lifetime opportunity to have your voice heard by FDA. FDA grants these meetings, one per different disease area, to help ensure that you know, they have an opportunity to learn about the condition. And so, you know, this is a unique time where FDA is taking you know, an entire day out of their busy schedules of review work to really focus on just SYNGAP1 and really, you know, do a deep dive. There's not many opportunities where FDA officials are able to just focus singularly on one condition, much less focus on a condition and hear directly from patients and caregivers. So what we hope you'll walk away from this presentation is to know that the knowledge that you kind of share with FDA is going to be helping with their decision making all throughout drug development and help lead to better treatments. So why now? You know, this is a very unique opportunity, and it's only been around since 2015 for patient organizations to be able to even host these types of meetings. You know, and even when the time that Larry and I were at FDA, while the patient voice had a role, it was much more limited and often very reactive. So FDA didn't have tools to kind of proactively try to learn about a disease. So that way they could help inform product development throughout, you know, from the very beginning stages. It was, you know, either when a drug was already developed or, you know, clinical trials were ongoing and weren't working. And so drug companies and FDA would reach out to patients to try to understand why that was. But so many, you know, patients had already participated, volunteered their time and energy and the risk of trying investigational drugs. And companies had invested so much money already into these programs, whereas if they had heard from you all earlier, they could have maybe helped avoid some of those failures. So FDA recognizes this and wants to hear your voices to help inform the whole process. And that's exactly what Larry's going to be talking about, to help you know, you all understand what that process looks like, where FDA fits into that, so that way you can really understand your audience for this meeting. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Larry, who's going to give you that background about FDA and drug development. I know we started a little bit late, so we're going to cover some of this quickly, but please, you know, if you do have questions, enter those into the chat box so we can make sure that you get the benefit of you know, understanding what it is we're here to share with you. Once Larry finishes, he's going to hand it back over to me. I'm going to help walk you through specifically what patient-focused drug development is and the meeting, and we're going to share some kind of key logistical information with you as well. So without further ado, Larry, take it away.
Okay, thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks, Monica. And we're really happy to be able to introduce to you today a little bit about FDA and about patient-focused drug development. So I'm going to start, I'm going to go fairly quickly through the slides about patient-focused drug development. About the FDA, because it's just to give you an idea about what the FDA does and what the FDA does not do. Next slide. And I have to apologize. There was a couple typos. If you saw the words primary hyperoxaluria, it's something I missed. I used these slides, part of them for another presentation. So that's just another rare disease that's having one of these kind of meetings. Next slide. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about drug discovery. So drug discovery is trying to find new treatments for disease. So researchers, they typically develop new drugs by learning new insights into a disease process that allows them to design a new product to either stop or reverse the effects of the disease. So how they do this is they test many different molecular compounds, many different drugs to try to find out which one has possible beneficial effects against, certain diseases. Oftentimes they learn from existing treatments that have unanticipated effects. So for instance, a drug will be developed for one thing, and then all of a sudden they find out, oh, it does this other thing as well. Maybe that could help this other disease. And then the other thing that happens is that new technology gets developed over time, and that provides new ways to try to develop new medical products to specific sites within the body or to manipulate genetic material. I'm sure all of you have heard of gene therapies. This is new technology that's continues to evolve. And once researchers identify a promising compound, the development of drugs always follows a well-established path to make sure that they're safe and that they're effective when they finally get approved and reach the public. Next. So I'm going to take you through this step by step. If you see at the bottom those arrows, these are the different steps a new drug has to go through. So the very first step is called preclinical development. So this is before a drug is ever tested in a human being. And the goals at this stage are to try to find out, is this drug going to be relatively safe to give?
Next to 126.
I think I need to ask everybody to put on mute. We're picking up someone else's voice. Thanks. And they want to find out if the new drug is effective against a disease target, or that they also study animal models at this phase of drug development. And the end result is something called an investigational new drug application, and that's when the company submits to the FDA that they're going to give this drug to human beings for the very first time. Next. So once they've gotten the okay from the FDA, they move into phase 1. So phase 1 is where they do some early studies. They're trying to find out, how is this drug absorbed in the body? How does the body get rid of the drug when it's finished with it? How is the company going to manufacture the drug? And they develop clinical protocols, which are basically experiments that they submit to the FDA to review. So at this first stage, they're really trying to find out, is the drug going to be safe in humans? And what are the most common side effects that might emerge? Next. After phase 1, after you get that information, they analyze it, and then they move into phase 2 of drug development. At this stage, they might test a few more people than they did in phase 1, and they're trying to find out if the drug has some effectiveness for the disease in which it is being developed. So they compare the drug in a study against placebo. So maybe half the people will get in the trial will get the drug, and half the people will get a sugar pill or placebo. And then they see if what is the reaction? Does the group that got the drug have a different effect than the one that got the placebo? And they also continue to monitor for short-term safety, side effects and safety at this stage. Next. Once they have this level data, they move to an even larger study called a phase 3 study. This is large scale, once again, a placebo, randomized placebo-controlled trial. They continue to assess the drug's effectiveness, the duration of effect. So once you take a pill, how long does it last? Or if you get an IV of something, how long does it stay in the body? And does it affect all populations differently? Sometimes within a disease, there's genetic subtypes, or some people manifest the disease differently. So they want to know, does it work for everybody the same way? And then they also want to know if dosages affect people differently. So if you give a small amount of the drug or more of the drug. And once again, they continue to study safety. At every stage of development, they want to make sure that the drug is safe. Next slide. And once they have all of this data, so they've got, you know, some safety data, some data about efficacy, they put this all together into a package called a new drug application or a biologics licensing application, and they submit this to the FDA. They have a pre-NDA meeting first to talk to the FDA about the package, the submission that they're going to send in. They try to discuss how the data is going to be analyzed, and they try to uncover any unresolved issues. And this NDA, or new drug application, it has all the data that's been collected so far. So from animals, from human beings, everything submitted to the FDA for their review. Next. So the FDA review, once they get all this information, it takes them anywhere from 6 to 10 months for a group of people, you know, the reviewers, the review staff, to look at all the data submitted and come to a determination on whether or not the drug should be approved or not. So they assign this review team, they review the effectiveness, they review the safety data, and they also want to know, how is this drug going to be manufactured, so that every time someone takes a pill, a new pill or something, that it's exactly the same, that everybody's getting the exact same dosage and the exact same kind of drug. And sometimes when they need expert opinions from outside, they put together something called an advisory committee. And these are specialists from outside the FDA that also give input into the review of the drug. But at the end of this process, the FDA either gives thumbs up or thumbs down. Either the drug is approved, or they get something called a complete response. And if they have a complete response, the company has more work to do to try to you know, bring more data to the FDA. But if they do get approved, that's when the drug becomes available in a pharmacy, and your physician can write a prescription and give you this new drug. Next. And so after approval, the process does not stop there. There's this next period is called the post-market safety surveillance period. And this means that clinical studies, that are brief in duration during the development, they often only study a small number, but once the drug's approved, maybe hundreds or even thousands of people might get the new drug, and we get a better idea at that point, are there side effects that maybe we didn't see in the small population? So at this point, doctors, patients can send information, new information to the FDA about how the drug works and if there's any side effects. Next. So what exactly is FDA's role? Next. So a couple things about the FDA. They do not actually develop drugs. All the drug development is done by people outside of FDA. These are researchers, pharmaceutical companies, and nonprofit groups. They do the drug development. And FDA doesn't test the drugs in clinical trials. They don't run clinical trials. However, they do review the clinical trials. So when a drug company is developing something, they send the design of the trial to the FDA, and the FDA reviewers look at it and give feedback to the drug company. Next.
I must have the...
So this is a couple other things about the FDA. The FDA doesn't have the authority to regulate the practice of medicine. What this means is that FDA regulates the development of drugs, but once the drug is approved, doctors are free to prescribe any FDA-approved drug for either the condition that's in the label, or they can try it for a different condition, and this is known as off-label use. And another thing FDA does not do is regulate the price of medicine. So some people say, oh, FDA, why are these drugs so expensive? The FDA has nothing to do with pricing. They don't know what the price of the drug is going to be when they review it. They don't base their decisions on what the price of the drug is going to be. And they don't even, they usually don't find out how much the drug's going to cost until way after it's approved. Next. So one of the main parts of FDA's mission is promoting public health. They do this in many ways through drug approvals, by contributing to science of drug development. And the FDA review staff, they have expert knowledge on drug development and clinical trials. So as I said earlier, they provide technical help to researchers and drug developers. They help the companies design the clinical trials. And they have numerous meetings along the way with companies as they're developing a drug to give them feedback so that you don't get feedback at the very end of the process. They work together through the whole development to try to come up with the best study designs. Next. So if you'd like more information about how FDA regulates drugs, here's a website that you can go to, and this will be available in at the end of the meeting, but if you have a copy of the slides or go to the recording. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it back over to James, and James is going to go now give us some specific information about patient-focused drug development and the meeting that we are so excitedly in the process of planning. So James.
Yeah, thank you, Larry, and thanks for covering so much so in such a short amount of time. We could have certainly probably had a whole semester on just teaching about drug development. Hopefully that was a good overview. If you haven't seen that before, it'll give you a high-level understanding of how drugs are developed and the role that FDA plays. And the reason that we start with that is, again, to really, we want you to have that kind of basic foundational understanding of the paradigm that we're all talking about and working within when we talk about this patient-focused drug development meeting. As Larry said, we're advancing through stages, through different phases, as they're called, of drug development, with bigger, longer studies being conducted. And so all throughout that, there's a lot of decisions being made. Companies are consulting with FDA throughout all of that. And so it's really valuable for all parties to have an equal understanding of the patient experience, so that way they can make better decisions. And we're going to talk about really where the patient voice fits into that. Okay. So this patient-focused drug development meeting, I kind of previewed this a little bit in the beginning. The purpose of this meeting really is to provide a more systematic way for FDA to gather the patient perspective about the condition and about the available treatment options. These are really important topics for FDA to understand, to be able to make different benefit risk assessments about new drugs. Ultimately, when FDA is making that approval decision that Larry talked about, they have to conclude that the benefits of a drug outweighs the risks. And so while they can use their scientific and medical expertise to evaluate what are the benefits, what do the data stand for, what are the risks based off of the different adverse event data, ultimately they have to make a judgment and balance those two things. And so who better to calibrate that decision? It's truly a subjective decision, because it's within the context of the particular condition. A less severe condition, maybe something that's only mildly troublesome, you wouldn't accept as much risk for. Whereas something where you're providing a benefit to something that patients say is truly burdensome in their daily lives, that, of course, FDA might be willing to accept, allow a greater risk to allow that drug to get approved. So your input helps FDA not only at the end of that decision making, but really throughout, in terms of informing clinical trial design, selecting the right things to measure in those clinical trials, and all of that starts with this meeting. So I mentioned that benefit risk assessment, and it's here, I just want to visualize that for you a little bit. This is actually something that FDA has to do anytime it's making an approval decision. It has to actually write this out as part of its review document. And they summarize the benefits and the risks of the product. But what you can see here is while that's done in the lower 3 bullets, the first 2 bullets of this benefit risk framework are the analysis of the condition, which is the understanding of the disease and the burdens that affect patients, and current treatment options, and understanding of what treatments are available and how well they're working and what are the downsides. And what you'll see is that the patient-focused drug development meeting very much aligns perfectly with these first 2 bullets, which then set up this benefit risk decision making. So our specific meeting, comes on the shoulders of 25 plus meetings that were organized by the FDA originally, followed by over 30 previous externally led PFDD meetings, which I mentioned came a few years later after FDA started hosting its own meetings, but really represented a passing of the torch. There's over 7,000 known rare diseases alone. There's no way that FDA could host meetings and keep up with the demand. And so this became an opportunity for interested patient organizations to put on and organize these meetings so that way FDA could participate in more of them. But the added benefit is it also allows the patient organization to step into the role of helping plan the agenda to help make sure it really represents and matches the disease area that it's being designed for. But what FDA certainly agrees with and emphasizes that I can't second enough is that these meetings are, the success of them hinges on the involvement of the patient community. And that's both not only just, patients, but also the caregivers that take care of patients. Whether you're a sibling or a parent or an other family member, your participation is key to the success of these meetings. And so importantly, I want to mention that your participation in this meeting is not the only opportunity for FDA to learn from this. All of that input will be summarized in what is called a Voice of the Patient report, which is the summary report from the meeting, which will summarize all of the testimony, different other types of input we'll be collecting through polling and written comments. And this document becomes a key reference document for the regulators throughout development. And I know from talking to different medical reviewers at FDA that they keep copies of these on their desk and use them as resources. So it really will be all the benefit of that day will carry on. And that information will also be shared with drug developers and the community more broadly. So kind of with that high level overview of PFDD, the concept of PFDD, let's talk about the meeting itself. So the meeting logistics, so I've mentioned that you all, patients and caregivers, are our key audience. We need you to show up in order for the meeting to be successful, but we're also inviting other stakeholders that we want to have attend and be in listening mode. So that's going to include FDA staff, staff from pharma and biotechnology companies, even others from like NIH researchers or maybe other academic clinical researchers. Will all be tuning in to learn and listen and learn from all of you. As you know, this meeting will be on November 19th. It'll be a half-day meeting, but starting a little later in the morning, at least on East Coast time, to allow our West Coast families to participate. This will be a virtual meeting, and as I'll discuss, this is really going to be interactive. This is not like today's webinar where you tune in and you're here and you maybe ask some questions. No, we'll be asking you the questions, and we'll be asking you all to tune in, to call in, write in, answer polling questions, really participate actively. So to kind of help show you what the day will look like, we're going to start out with some, as you might imagine, welcoming and introductory comments from Bridge the Gap, as well as from the Food and Drug Administration. After that, we don't want to assume that our FDA reviewers have the basic kind of scientific and biologic understanding of SYNGAP1. So we're going to have a presentation that provides that kind of background information on the science and on from a medical perspective on SYNGAP1 to help make sure all of our FDA staff have that same kind of background. And that's really going to set the stage then for what is the core of this meeting, which is to hear from all of you. Our hearing from all of you will be broken into two topics. As I mentioned, this meeting is aligned with trying to help set the context for those benefit risk decisions FDA makes. And so we break the meeting into those same two topics. We're first going to explore how the symptoms and health effects of SYNGAP1 affect your daily life. And then we're going to build on that by, once we understand the condition, understanding what it is that you do to try to manage and live with the symptoms and the health effects of the condition, and get your perspectives on how well those treatments are working and what it is you'd like to see from a next treatment. We're going to be doing this with some pre-recorded patient panels to start the discussion, followed by an open discussion with everyone else that's live. That will also include some polling questions. I'll go into more detail about that in just a minute. And then once we've heard from you all throughout the day, we will have some summary and closing remarks to talk about what we've heard and what next steps will look like. So I've mentioned that we're going to be asking you all to participate actively and live and help answer questions for us as the experts in SYNGAP1. And so this is going to be, these discussion questions I'm showing kind of are the questions that set the kind of stage for all the different things we'll be asking of you. So in that first topic, we want to understand SYNGAP1 itself, the symptoms, health effects, daily impacts. We're going to be asking you not only what are those symptoms and health effects, but help us understand which ones have the most significant impact on you and your loved ones' lives. We're going to want to know how that varies. So whether that's day to day, week to week, month to month, or even over the course of years. And we not only want to understand what those symptoms and health effects are and the ones that you report as most burdensome, but we want to understand what that means and what that looks like in your life. So one way we're going to get at that is by asking you if there's specific activities that are important to you that you can't do at all or as fully because of SYNGAP1. I mentioned that we'll be talking about symptoms over time, but I want to point out this last question here, that recognizing that not all of the burdens or impacts of a condition are currently experienced, but they might be things that are on the horizon. And so we want to ask you about your fears and your worries about the future and getting older living with SYNGAP1. Once we've answered those questions, and that's a lot already to try to answer, we're going to build on that, and we're going to ask you to talk about your treatment approaches. And this isn't just drugs, even though there may be symptomatic drugs that you're using, things to try to help with certain parts of the condition. They might be, types of therapy, whether that's physical therapy or speech therapy or something else, other types of medical treatment, procedures, but also bigger picture things. It might be diet or lifestyle modification, something you need to modify within your own home just to make living with SYNGAP1 a little bit easier. We're going to want to get your assessment of how well are those things working in helping manage your SYNGAP1, and recognizing that no treatment approach comes without some kind of trade-off. We're going to want you to tell us what are the most significant downsides of those treatments, whether it's a side effect of a drug or the amount of time that it takes to get the treatment or recover from it, whatever that might be to you. We want to hear that. And what this is going to do is tell us what's left, what are the unmet needs that aren't addressed fully or at all by what you have available to you. And we're going to ask you, while we all would want a cure for SYNGAP1, knowing that other therapies might be coming down the pipeline first before a cure, we want to know what specific things you would be looking for from that next treatment. What would be meaningful, whether it's being able to maintain things that you currently have that you're worried about losing, or if it's being able to do something a little bit more, or have a little bit less of a certain symptom. Whatever it is that you view as being important and meaningful, We want to hear that because that's going to help us drive and understand how we should assess drugs moving forward. So in presenting those questions, we're going to be having a few different ways of hearing from your community and you all during the day. We're going to kick it off with some pre-recorded panel statements. This is going to help set the foundation for the discussion. We'll have a handful of people that are selected for each of our 2 topics to kick us off and share some of their perspectives. They were selected to reflect a range of experiences with the condition, but certainly can't represent all of the experiences. And that's why, very importantly, once we hear from them, we're going to then open up the discussion. And most of the meeting will be open for everybody else to participate and share their stories, share their thoughts, their preferences. We're going to do that through polling questions. You'll be able to, on your phone, or since you'll be on your computer, you could open a new browser. And actually live, real time, we'll be asking polling questions. We'll get to see the results real time, get to understand the experiences of the people that are participating. And then at the same time, ask you all to call in. I'll be moderating the meeting, so I'll be able to talk to you real time, ask you follow-up questions. So as I share those discussion questions, you'll be able to answer them and have FDA hear your voice. There'll also be an opportunity for you to write in with comments as well that will be sharing some of those throughout the course of the meeting. So Larry and I, we've worked on a lot of these. We both worked on PFDD meetings when we were at FDA, when FDA was running them. We've run about 3/4 of all of the PFDD, externally led PFDD meetings to date. So we have a lot of experience with this, and we want to make sure that the SYNGAP1 meeting benefits from all of that. So we have some tips for you about effective participation. Keep in mind everything that you learned today that we went over. What is FDA's role in all of this? What's the purposes of this meeting? Where's your voice? Where does that fit in? Keeping your audience in mind is always helpful when you're thinking about sharing your stories and picking what parts of your story you want to share. Review those discussion questions that I shared. We're going to make those available to everyone. Start to think, and prioritize. There's many things that you live with and experience, but we want to hear from you about which things you think are most important. So that way you can look, you can start to figure that out, and then when we get to that question during the meeting, you can participate at that time. And we really do want you to share. We want you to find that question that you want to speak to, and when we get to it, we want you to call in. We want to hear from you. The more voices that FDA hears, the better. Because that's the whole point of these meetings, is to try to hear from as many different people within the community as possible. Even if you've heard something, you see here on the 4th bullet that someone's already said, and you think, yeah, I have that too. That makes sense. I agree with that. Don't say, okay, well, someone else said it, so we're good. No, actually, FDA needs to hear the things that are common across different people living with the same condition. And so, of course, when you do share your perspective, put your own unique perspective or personal perspective on it. The same things are going to impact different people in different ways, and that's what we want to hear. And of course, if you have something different and unique to share that's maybe in the minority of an experience, of course we want to hear about that too. Knowing that in any kind of meeting format like this, we only have a certain amount of time. That kind of full day meeting agenda might look like it's a lot of time, but it will fly by. So we do ask that you keep your comments concise and focused, just so we can hear from as many people as possible. And know that at the end of the day, we'll be able to collect additional written comments before and after the meeting. So while we want to prioritize you participating live that day, just know that you'll always be able to contribute more too. So to participate, we want you to join in the meeting live. This is a virtual meeting, so you don't have to go far. You just pre-register on the website. You'll be able to start reviewing these materials. We'll be asking you to submit any written comments that you have, and we'll continue to collect those for 30 days after the meeting. And ultimately, everything, whether it's live at the meeting or something in writing, we're going to look at all of that collectively and use that to draft that voice of the patient report to submit to FDA and to make available for the public. you know, if you're interested in playing a role in this meeting beyond, you know, just joining the day of, you can register and let us know as part of the registration for the event, which is on the bridgesyngap.org website. And just to summarize, I know I've covered a lot. We started with how do drugs get developed, what's FDA's role, where does the voice of the patient fit into all of that, and then how does that all translate into this meeting that we're going to be having together. You know, this is such a unique opportunity. We sometimes joke and say this is like a wedding. You know, that's how important this is when we're planning this. You get one shot at it, or hopefully, you know, you're not. But you know, so this is really a unique opportunity for you all to show up and have your voices heard, have that meaningful impact. Larry and I have seen it. We've seen it where FDA, you know, thought they understood a disease, and they really, you know, had some misconception. And this type of input totally turned, you know, FDA on a 180, or, you know, FDA didn't really have an understanding. I mean, how can they? There's so many different rare diseases. How the FDA can't be an expert in all of them, you know, so that they get to benefit from one of these meetings. And then maybe it's the very first meeting they ever have with a company that's developing a drug for the disease. They're already in a much better starting point than they ever would have been just from trying to read up. You know, there's not that much in the literature on SYNGAP1, I can promise you that. So this is going to be way more rich of a resource to them than what they could research on their own. This is really, you know, hopefully the beginning of a process where, you know, your input into the process isn't one and done, but this is a really important first step. So we really want to encourage you to participate and help make a difference in all of this. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Monica, see if we have any questions or if anything that she wants to add as well.
Well, I thank you, James and Larry. You summed it up really well. I do have to second, this is almost like planning a wedding. It's just not as expensive. But I tell you what, it is going to be worth every dime, every bit of time and effort for our community to come together. From all over the world. We want to hear from everyone we can from all over the world, because it's not just what happens in the U.S. We can take what we do here and really use it as a seed to plant it all over the world. So, you know, and I know we have a few guests online that are international. You know, we anticipate on really trying to support everyone all over the world with this information, because it really will help our organization and our community and getting the FDA. And I have to say, I think all 4 divisions of the FDA will be at the meeting, which I heard was kind of a rarity because we are such a unique disease, and we're probably one of the few ultra rare diseases they've ever chosen to hear. So this is an incredible opportunity for us to have our voices heard. I just want to open it up for questions. And if you have a question, please unmute yourself and fire away. We have, I guess, about, let's say about 10 minutes. Does anybody have any specific questions?
So I see Julie has a question, and then we have one from the chat. So why don't we start with you, Julie?
Hi. So I think that although I think I could do a pretty good job describing my son's disability and the impact it has had on our family, I think there's something about seeing with these challenges these kids face. Is there going to be anything other than maybe the advocacy video that the Bridge the Gap Foundation put out, so they could see the level of challenge that these kids face on a daily basis across skill sets?
Yes. So maybe I'll start, and Larry and Monica, of course, feel free to chime in on any of these questions. But, you know, one thing is by working with our panelists ahead of time, we're going to have an opportunity, since they're pre-recording their statements, to actually share pictures and video clips of the condition as they're sharing. we also, because we're in this virtual format, anything that may not be covered by our panelists, we can work to make sure that we have video clips that we can share that help, you know, provide that visual. And so we're going to be looking at that carefully, and Monica may be reaching out to people and saying, hey, you know, we need X, Y, or Z as a video clip that we can show at some point. And so we will absolutely be including some visual components, because we absolutely agree, you know, just, you know, whether, you know, with your child, if you're speaking, how are they supposed to, you know, get to see and know and get to kind of see what it even looks like to kind of live with some of these symptoms.
And there was a question in the chat. Does the FDA share all of our feedback and perspectives with drug and treatment development researchers and corporations to guide their development? If so, does our identifying info get attached with each time they share?
Yes, yeah, I'll take this one. So I think we mentioned earlier, all of the information that we collect, all the testimony, everything that everybody, when they call in, when they type in a comment, all of that's going to be collected into a document called the Voice of the Patient report. This report will be published and up on the Bridge the Gap website. Anyone else that wants to put it on their website is welcome to as also. It's in the public domain, so you know, anyone can look at it. Someone at a university, a drug developer, a new patient, someone newly diagnosed with SYNGAP might be interested. And as far as names go, I think we're going to try to, we'll probably use your first name. And if anyone really says that I prefer my name isn't connected to my comments, we can absolutely, not include your name. But we usually say somebody's first name and that they said such and such. So.
Yeah, we will have a process in which we have you say whether or not you don't mind or consent, or how you would like to be recognized or not recognized or cited, I guess. So we'll have a process in place, and all that's going to be developed. I also wanted to add, I'd forgotten to mention that we do take the data. We are going to be using the data out of the registry to kind of draw a picture clinically. Because if you can take some of this natural history study data that we've been collecting over the last 3 years and show that, yes, these are the type of seizures and this is its prevalence. If we have all this in this concentrated document, it's really going to be really impactful because it's going to be delivered to industry partners, biotech, of course, the FDA and things like that. So I do encourage you to continue to help us paint that picture with your voice even in the database, because we're going to be using that information to help paint a better picture, more really to just validate everything that you're saying with data. So I just wanted to make that point. Did anybody else, I think we had another, did anybody else have a question?
Just wanted to add as well, please feel free to invite your doctors to come and watch the meeting. If you have family members that you want to educate more about SYNGAP, invite them, or friends, maybe a close friend that you would like them to know more about it. This is an open meeting for, it's a public meeting, so anyone can join.
And it's free.
It's free.
Talking about the one in November, right?
Yes.
Okay. The only question I had, which I think you guys answered, was naturally you'd be looking for some videos of our kids, maybe with their behavioral issues or their seizures, or whatever we're able to capture to show the symptoms that our children are dealing with on a daily basis.
Absolutely, Kevin. Yeah, like as you're thinking about this, and Kevin, I think you've already volunteered to be a panelist. Is that correct?
Yes.
So as part of your panel, we'll talk about that in the next session, but yeah, we would like you to include videos, even if they're just a short snippet, like if you describe something and then you have a short video that shows what it is. So we're both learning from hearing about it, but as well seeing it. Sometimes the visuals can be very powerful.
Mm-hmm. We had a couple more questions, and for time's sake, I'll really quickly go over this. Francisco, let's see, are pharma companies already developing drugs for SYNGAP1? Currently, in the realm of industry, we do have several companies that have what they call preclinical programs. And what that means is they have taken either SYNGAP mice, and then for instance, you all saw the Stoke information where they did the research, what they call in vivo or in a test tube. And they were successful in those tests. But now they need to move those into animal models. And so once they move those into animal models and they have successful results, and the company decides to move forward to invest in that, then they will begin what they call R&D, our research and development. And we do have several biotech companies, probably 6 of them right now. But one of the things is that they are looking for in our community, this is why this meeting is so very important, is because they are looking for the details. They're looking for endpoints. They're looking for biomarkers. Currently, we have 2 identified biomarkers, but they aren't validated. And what that means is we have to have more people put that information in the database so that we can actually validate a marker, meaning we have to not just take a small sample of the community to show that there is some commonality or some kind of outcome measure, but we need to show a much larger significant group of people do. So they're looking at our natural history study data. And if you do not have good data and you don't have enough participating, then you're not going to get biopharma to continue to take the risk. We have to de-risk it. And the only way we can de-risk a pharma company coming in and helping us is with data. And so that's why I really encourage everyone to just continue to do what they're doing, answer those questions, and help us really develop the best model that they can work off of. So Nabrina, it said you may have already answered. I missed, the process for providing information in advance. We're going to be having polls come out. We're going to be doing advanced polls, and then we're going to be doing polls during the meeting, and then we're going to have a comment period after the meeting. So there are going to be multiple opportunities where you can put as much information about your experience and give it to us so that we can incorporate it in this report. The patient of the voice report, I have to say, is probably going to be no less than about 100 pages. So know that this is not just a little rinky-dink pamphlet. This is an actual resource guide, comprehensive of everything with SYNGAP1. So I think with that, I know we're a little over, but Larry and James, did y'all have anything you else wanted to add?
No, I would just encourage people to, for all those opportunities, keep going to the PFDD page on the website where you found the information on this webinar. We'll continuously update that with these new opportunities. But most important of all, we really look forward to being with you and hearing from you on the day of the meeting itself. So thanks so much for taking time today to learn a little bit more about this.
Okay, thank you. And for those of you on the call, I'm going to end this. I'm sorry for the confusion with the webinar. We do have an orientation for the people who did already sign up to be a panelist and for a discussion leader. That Zoom information was emailed to you a little before this meeting started. So you will have to log in using that particular link. If we do have someone that is unable to participate in the panel or drops out, or we have an open position, please let us know, and we will put you on our waiting list. But still, your story is important. So just keep that story handy. And I'm going to go ahead and end this call. I want to thank everyone for being on. You have no idea how excited I am for our community. It's just going to make me cry. And I'll probably cry the day of this meeting, just like at a wedding, because this is so important. And this is a huge step for us as a community. So I thank all of you for all your support. I thank you for being here this afternoon. And y'all just keep the hope, one step at a time. And I tell you what, this one is a big, huge step for us. And we're gonna nail it. So y'all have a good one. And I'm gonna give everybody about 5 minutes to kind of log off and then log back on if you got the registration. You will have to register to get that emailed back to you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.